You know, there was a time when everybody would look at that outhouse and know for a fact that Shrek would open that door to start off his day. Nowadays, on the internet, you never know what's coming out of the— Oh, thank God! Oh, oh wow. Oh wow, what a relief. And you know, it actually is very nice to see Shrek like in the good old days, you know what I mean? Which actually reminds me. I know it seems hard to believe nowadays, but I remember when there was a time when Shrek was taken seriously as a groundbreaking cinematic achievement. Not just in animation, but for movies in general. In fact, when I was a kid growing up in the early 2000s, Shrek was the Despicable Me of its time, being hailed as the biggest and most beloved non-Disney animated franchise. Unlike today, however, where despite still being quite popular, what he's known for is absolutely nothing like how it was before. Somehow, the internet decided to take Shrek and have him be one of the most common subjects to make numerous of weird memes all over social media. We've all heard of those rise and fall stories and then would often have a comeback plot afterwards. But Shrek would have to be one of the most fascinating ones to look at. Not just because of how big he was and then fell hard, but also how he returned in the spotlight in a way that, well, to put it lightly, nobody would ever expect. What I'm basically asking here is, what the fridge happened to Shrek? Seriously, has anybody ever stopped and thought about how did Shrek go from this to whatever the fridge this is? I decided to go look into the history of the franchise and how it went viral on the internet afterwards to see what led to this shift in popularity, and the conclusion that I found might finally make some sense into all the worshippings, shippings, and all sorts of different interpretations of the movie. So, how did Shrek become the internet's favorite meme? Let's find out. Now, keep in mind that I'm only going to be looking into the history of Shrek's popularity. I'm not going to go into the entire history of the making of these movies and all that kind of stuff. If you really want that, you go to Animation Look Back. Our story begins with the 1990 William Steig book, Shrek. Producer John H. Williams saw the potential of turning this into a movie and bought the rights so that it could be done at the newly formed DreamWorks Animation in the hands of its founder, Jeffrey Katzenberg. It was one of the first movies to start production at the new studio, and it took a total of 6 years in order to craft the computer animation to make it look the best that it could possibly be at the time with Pacific Data images, and to find the right voice of Shrek. Sure, some like Nicolas Cage and Leonardo DiCaprio passed on the part, but at least they did get Chris Farley.
People see me and they go, "Ah! Help! A big, stupid, stinky, smelly, ugly ogre! I'm so scared!" And they judge me before they even know me.
Too bad that he died before finishing off all his lines, so they replaced him with Mike Myers, who did the entire recording session twice. Well, don't worry, nothing bad actually happened. After the first round, Mike suggested the idea of giving Shrek a Scottish accent, and then the guys at DreamWorks were like, "Dude, that's even better! Okay, we're gonna legit do that for the movie." The film finally was released on May 18th, 2001, and turned out to be one of the biggest hits of the year. Critics were praising how it was able to be highly entertaining for both kids and adults, on top of having strong animation, a clever script, and a hilarious performance by Eddie Murphy as Donkey. As for the box office, it was the 4th highest grossing film of the year behind Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, and Monsters, Inc. by grossing a total of more than $484 million, and almost $268 million of which was made domestically. It went on to go and win and be nominated for several awards, including a Golden Globe nomination for Best Motion Picture in a Comedy or Musical, winning 8 Annie Awards, including Best Animated Feature, and being the first ever movie to win in the new category of Best Animated Feature at the Oscars, on top of getting an additional nomination for Best Adapted Screenplay. Now, many have speculated that the big reason why the film was so successful in the first place was because it was released at the perfect time for 2 reasons. Number 1, the computer animation. This was was released at a time when an animated feature that fully uses CGI is still a fresh and new concept. The only mainstream computer animated features before this was 2 Toy Story films, 2 movies about ants, and a dinosaur movie that's literally called Dinosaur. Audiences were intrigued to see how this new medium can be taken to the next level in ways that nobody has ever seen before in a movie. And number 2, this was a new great animated movie not from Disney. During this time, Disney was losing a lot of momentum in terms of their animated films. Their movies were not as well received both critically and financially as they used to be in the early 1990s. So when Shrek came into the scene, satirizing all different kinds of fairy tales, not only did it offer something that they wouldn't get from Disney at the time, but it was also perceived as a 90-minute middle finger to the Mouse House. It's like if Jeffrey Katzenberg was sending a message to his old boss like, "Don't want to make me the Disney president, Michael? Then I'll be the president of my own kingdom, and I will rule the world with a talking donkey and a green fat bastard." What the movie ultimately did was that it not only launched Shrek's fame, but it also officially made DreamWorks as Disney's latest and greatest rival in animation, a name that would be synonymous with Pixar for years to come. The next step for Shrek at this point is to grow from being a successful movie to a successful franchise, just to prove to people that this is much more than a one-hit wonder. And that's where Shrek 2 came into the scene. Released 3 years after the first film, the movie was an even greater hit than the first one. Critics were saying how it was amazing because of the humor and the new characters like Puss in Boots, Prince Charming, and Fairy Godmother. And even to this day, many people would say that this is not only one of DreamWorks' best films, but also the best Shrek film. However, its biggest legacy would reside at the box office, ending up earning $441 million domestically and a worldwide total of $920 million. At the time, this was a real record breaker. It was named the highest grossing animated feature of all time for 6 years before Toy Story was the first animated movie that made more than $1 billion, and was the highest grossing animated feature of all time domestically for 12 years before Finding Dory was named the new champion. Who knew that the only way to take down a DreamWorks sequel is for Pixar to make their batch of their own sequels? At this point, Shrek was officially the biggest icon in animation. In fact, the film almost made fairy tale satires its own genre, giving us movies like Hoodwinked, Happily Never After, and even Disney's Enchanted. Wait. Shrek influenced Disney? The only thing more ironic than that is the big conclusion to all this at the end. You'll see what I mean. With 2 highly successful movies and a 3D show at Universal, audiences saw the Green Ogre as something that can turn anything into cartoon gold. And with the announcement of 3 more Shrek movies after the second film, the public became excited to know that their future will have more great adventures with Shrek. However, while the celebrations lasted in the years after Shrek 2, everything would change in 2007 with the release of Shrek the Third. Okay, wait, hold it. Put back the lights on. Seriously, I'm talking about the third Shrek movie, not a godforsaken murder. When the movie came out, critics were mostly mixed about the film, mostly saying that it was mediocre. I mean, it can have its moments, but the pop culture references and the fairy tale jokes are getting stale, and the cleverness of the previous 2 are pretty much gone. It even did very well at the box office by getting $799 million worldwide, and held the record for the biggest opening ever for an animated film for 9 years before it got beaten by, again, Finding Dory. Sure, it ain't Shrek 2 numbers, but it still counts as a financial hit. Okay, so it's not the worst animated film out there, not even by the studio standards. So why does it have all this hate? Well, you have to keep in mind about Shrek's popularity before Shrek the Third came in. His peak was at the level that only very few animated franchises ever achieved. Shrek 3 was possibly the most anticipated and hyped up film of 2007. So when audiences would discover that between 2 and 3, Shrek would go from being great to mediocre, they were beyond disappointed. I would even say that they were betrayed. I can speak as a witness that it was at this point that the Shrek craze as the beloved animated film series was pretty much dead. The fame quickly went from can't stop talking about it to something that people don't want to talk about publicly. The only exception to this was maybe the 2008 Broadway show, but that kind of got a pass because that was more connected with just the first film than how it was as a whole franchise. But considering that people have grown a distaste for the ogre, and having the reminder that 2 more films would be coming, Shrek would officially be viewed by the public as that franchise. You know exactly what I'm talking about by that franchise. The one that would get progressively worse after each movie and would feel like there's nothing that's stopping them. We all know at least one that was at some point that franchise. Michael Bay's Transformers, Ice Age, Alvin and the Chipmunks, Pirates of the Caribbean, and in this case, Shrek. What's even worse is that not only did the film series become unappealing, but even the celebrity voices who were at the top of their game when the first feature was released were simultaneously getting into a real low point in their careers. Mike Myers went from being Austin Powers to the Love Guru. Eddie Murphy went from the Nutty Professor to Norbit. And Cameron Diaz went from the girl in There's Something About Mary to the girl from What Happens in Vegas. It's pretty clear now that Shrek's time was done, and even DreamWorks took notice. So with another movie in production, they decided to axe off the 5th one and make the 4th the final Shrek film, with Shrek Forever After, released on May 21st, 2010. And it did not want you to forget that this was the last one. Seriously, the marketing was intense when it came to that fact. Not just because of how it's literally called Shrek Forever After, or often referred to as Shrek the Final Chapter, but even the credits were showing a slideshow of the events of all 4 movies, and the trailers and commercials bombarded audiences with cringy ogre puns like,
"It's all ogre now."
Oh, don't worry, that'll actually be brought up later. As for how the movie itself did, critics say that it was a slight improvement from last time, but it still wasn't all that good with the lazy plot that was basically a cheap copy of It's a Wonderful Life. As for the money, again, not the best that Shrek has done, but still got some impressive numbers with $752.6 million at the box office. After the film, Shrek would only have time for smaller projects like shorts, holiday TV specials, dumb YouTube videos, and theme park rides in several places around the world. The most that DreamWorks did with the franchise afterwards was shifting the spotlight from Shrek to Puss in Boots, where he got his own movie in 2011 and even his own Netflix series in 2015. As for the elusive 5th movie, well, for many years, DreamWorks would keep on saying that it was in development, but as of 2018, the chances of that becoming a reality are starting to look like a fairy tale. No pun intended. The last time any news of Shrek 5 was back in 2016 after Comcast purchased the entirety of DreamWorks Animation, and would have a script written by the same writer of the Austin Powers sequels and The Boss Baby, Michael McCullers. The plan was supposed to make it a reboot of the franchise with a release date of around 2019 or 2020. However, since then, nothing else was ever brought up, and with the schedule being filled with other projects, it doesn't look like we'll be getting a Shrek 5 anytime soon. And thus concludes our story of Shrek's cinematic adventure. Now here's the part where we get weird and freaky! Admittedly, it wasn't easy trying to find the seed that was planted to become the entire piece of madness that we know today. But according to my research, the first use of Shrek as a weird internet meme came from DeviantArt at the start of 2010, where user C. Mara made a series of comics that showed the complicated and romantic relationship of Shrek and Shadow the Hedgehog. And what's even worse is that this Shrek and Shadow shipping went on to become its own thing. Why is this even a thing? Everything I see from this is each a reason why it should not be a thing. Although that is just one example of using Shrek on the internet, it was the stepping stone of how people would associate Shrek with online weirdness. The culture of Shrek on the internet, however, wouldn't officially kick off until the middle of 2012, where for a few years on 4chan came Shrek-chan, a place where internet dwellers made messed up posts and insane images related to Shrek, and even expressed their thoughts and fond memories of the movies. It even grew a My Little Pony style fandom where they would call each other brogers. But then once we enter into 2013, this new demented Shrek would spread out his onion layers for the whole internet to see. A 4chan poem called Shrek is Love, Shrek is Life came into the scene and was later adapted into a YouTube video using Valve's Source Filmmaker. The video itself became viral a year later, and the poem depicted the story of a 9-year-old boy who loved Shrek like a religious figure, until one day, Shrek finally came into his room and...
I want to please Shrek. He roars a mighty roar as he fills my butt with his love.
You know, when I would stumble upon stuff like this on social media, that's when my brain would tell me, okay, that's enough internet for today, time to do something productive with my time. Ever since then, Shrek's online fame would gradually switch from being a meme to the theme of a meme. Unlike trends, Shrek never went away, and the use of the character himself and the song from the opening of the first film, All Star by Smash Mouth, would become the subject of many memes to come. In fact, think of a meme that's popular right now, and there's a very good chance that there's already a Shrek version of it. I know it sounds crazy, but Shrek has achieved the impossible by becoming a timeless meme. So now that we've reached the point where Shrek is now a legendary meme, it does beg the question, how did he become popular on the internet this way? Well, like in the first film, his popularity regrew thanks to perfect timing. Shrek started to become a meme a little over a decade after the 2001 film. This would make it eligible for the movie and the franchise to be considered nostalgic to teens and young adults. Many would even debate that the films did not age well, and nowadays, they're not as well praised as they were at the start of the 2000s. So those who got into the Shrek hype when they were much younger decided to re-love the ogre, but in a more ironic sense. In fact, I just realized that the whole Shrek meme really made the franchise come full circle. Think about it. A popular theory about Shrek is that it was made as a satire to a trend that was popular a decade before it was released, which was Disney's fairy tale movies. However, the crazy Shrek memes are built as a satire to what was popular a decade before it came in, which was the popularity of the Shrek franchise. And suddenly, the transition from movie star to online phenomenon all makes sense now. At the peak of his popularity, Shrek was one of the biggest names in animation next to Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny. His movies were once considered some of the most important animated features of all time, and ranked up with the classics by Walt Disney. However, after Shrek the Third was released, the illusion of him being the cartoon messiah suddenly vanished, and the once perfect onion started to show its layers of problems. At the time DreamWorks decided to move on from developing more of the franchise, this was when internet culture started to grow drastically and decided to adopt Shrek as this icon of weird gags that make no sense. Nowadays, whenever the subject of Shrek pops up, the first thing most people would think of is not their favorite scene from one of the movies, it would be the latest meme that they saw a line that would start with some "body wants." Now, I'm not saying that the internet completely took Shrek from DreamWorks. They still do some official side projects with him to show that he is still one of the strong, viable franchises that they have, alongside Madagascar, Kung Fu Panda, and How to Train Your Dragon. It's just that the way people view and use Shrek is like this counterculture to pop culture, mocking the way that the general public would consume family-friendly entertainment that he was once a part of. Just like how Shrek did during his heyday when he was mocking Disney. But the people who make those weird memes aren't doing it out of spite or because they hate Shrek and his movies. They do it out of love from the fond memories they have when they first saw the movie. As they say, Shrek is love. And Shrek is...
Oh, hello there!
Somebody once
Told me!
world
It's gonna grow me!
my name the Shabestu and she was
Looking kind of dumb with her finger and her thumb
in the
sheep
of
for well, start coming, don't coming to the and running.
Makes sense to live more. Your get smart, your gets dumb.
So much to do. So much to see. So what's wrong?
Tag in the bag.
You
Never
know if you don't go. You
Never
can if you don't go.